Chapter 13. "Put my bag in the front bedroom, Calpurnia," was the first thing Aunt Alexandra said. "Jean Louise, stop scratching your head," was the second thing she said. Calpurnia picked up Auntie's heavy suitcase and opened the door. "I'll take it," said Jim, and took it. I heard the suitcase hit the bedroom floor with a thump. The sound had a dull permanence about it. "Have you come for a visit, Auntie?" I asked. Aunt Alexandra's visits from the landing were rare, and she traveled in state. She owned a bright green square Buick and a black chauffeur, both kept in an unhealthy state of tidiness. But today, they were nowhere to be seen. "Didn't your father tell you?" she asked. Jim and I shook our heads. "Probably he forgot. He's not in yet, is he?" "No, he doesn't usually get back till late afternoon," said Jim. "Well, your father and I decided it was time I came and stay with you for a while." For a while in Macomb meant anything from 3 days to 30 years, and Jim and I exchanged glances. "Jim's growing up now, and you are too," she said to me, "and we decided it would be best for you to have some feminine influence. It won't be many years, Jean Louise, before you become interested in clothes and boys." I could have made several answers to this. Cal's a girl. It would be many years before I would be interested in boys. I would never be interested in clothes, but I kept quiet. "What about Uncle Jimmy?" asked Jem. "Is he coming too?" "Oh no, he's staying at the landing. He'll keep the place going." The moment I said, "Won't you miss him?" I realized that this was not a tactful question. Uncle Jimmy present or Uncle Jimmy absent made not much of a difference. He never said anything. Aunt Alexandra ignored my question. I could think of nothing else to say to her. In fact, I could never think of anything to say to her. I sat thinking of past painful conversations between us. "How are you, Jean Louise?" "Fine, thank you, ma'am. How are you?" "Very well, and thank you. What have you been doing with yourself?" "Nothing." "Don't you do anything?" "No." "Certainly you have friends?" "Yes." "Well, what do you all do?" "Nothing." It was plain that Auntie thought me dull in the extreme, because I once heard her tell Atticus that I was sluggish. There was a story behind all this, but I had no desire to extract it from her then. Today was Sunday, and Aunt Alexandra was positively irritable on the Lord's Day. I guess it was her Sunday corset. She wasn't fat, but solid, and she chose protective garments that drew up her bosom to giddy heights, pinched in her waist, flared out her rear, and managed to suggest that Aunt Alexandra's was once an hourglass figure, and from any angle, it was formidable. The remainder of the afternoon went by in the gentle gloom that descends when relatives appear, but was dispelled when we heard a car turn in the driveway. It was Atticus, home from Montgomery. Jim, forgetting his dignity, ran with me to meet him. Jim seized his briefcase and bag, and I jumped into his arms and felt a vague dry kiss and said, "Did you bring me a book? Do you know Auntie's here?" Atticus answered both questions in the affirmative. "How'd you like for her to come live with us?" I said I would like it very much, which was a lie, but one must lie under certain circumstances and at all times when one can't do anything about it. "We felt it was time you children needed—" "Well, it's like this, Scout," Atticus said. "Your aunt's doing me a favor as well as you all. I can't stay here all day with you, and the summer's going to be a hot one." "Yes, sir," I said, not understanding a word he said. I had an idea, however, that Aunt Alexandra's appearance on the scene was not so much Atticus's doing as it was hers. Auntie had a way of declaring what is best for the family, and I suppose her coming to live with us was in that category. Macomb welcomed her. Miss Maudie Atkinson baked a laying cake so loaded with shinny it made me tight. Shinny is alcohol, and tight is a word for, like, drunk. So she baked a cake with alcohol in it, and Scout saying that she put so much alcohol in the cake that it made her drunk. She's obviously being, like, sarcastic or not serious, but kind of alluding to the fact that the cake tasted a lot like probably vodka or whiskey. Macomb welcomed her. Miss Maudie Atkinson baked a laying cake so loaded with shinny it made me tight. Miss Stephanie Crawford had long visits with Aunt Alexandra, consisting mostly of Miss Stephanie shaking her head and saying, "Mm-mm-mm." Miss Rachel next door had Auntie over for coffee in the afternoon, and Mr. Nathan Radley went so far as to come up to the front yard and say he was glad to see her. Again, that's Nathan, not Boo. When she settled in with us and life resumed its daily pace, Aunt Alexandra seemed as if she had always lived with us. Her missionary society refreshments added to her reputation as a hostess. She did not permit Calpurnia to make the delicacies required to sustain society, through long reports on Rice Christians. She joined and became secretary of the Macomb Emancious Club, and to all parties present and participating in the life of the county, Aunt Alexandra was one of the last of her kind. She had riverboat, boarding school manners, and let any moral come along, she would uphold it. She was born in the objective case, and she was an incurable gossip. She likes to gossip, which is common for people in town, especially women in town. And so, yeah, the Missionary Society is like a group of women that do like missionary work. So like they talk about the Bible, talk about raising money for charity and stuff like that. That's what a missionary society is. Where are we? We're right here. When Aunt Alexandra went to school, self-doubt could not be found in any textbook, so she knew not its meaning. She was never bored, and given the slightest chance, she would exercise her royal prerogative. She would arrange, advise, caution, and warn, meaning she told Scout what to do all the time. She never let a chance escape her to point out the shortcomings of other tribal groups to the greater glory of our own, a habit that amused Jem rather than annoyed him. Auntie better watch how she talks, scratch most folks in Macomb, and they're kin to us. Aunt Alexandra, in underlining the moral of a young Sam Merriweather's suicide, said it was caused by a morbid streak in the family. Let a 16-year-old girl giggle in the choir, and Auntie would say, "It just goes to show you all the Penfield women are flighty." And everyone in Macomb, it seemed, had a streak. A drinking streak, a gambling streak, a mean streak, a funny streak. So like a streak is something that the family is well known for. So some families are well known for gambling. All their men gamble. Some families are known to be mean. They have a mean streak. They're rude to people. That kind of thing. Once, when Auntie assured us that Miss Stephanie Crawford's tendency to mind other people's business was hereditary, Atticus said, "Sister, when you stop and think about it, our generation's practically the first in the Finch family not to marry their own cousin. Would you say that the Finches have an incestuous streak?" Auntie said no, and that's where we got our small hands and feet. I never understood her preoccupation with heredity. Somewhere I had received the impression that fine folks were people who did the best they could with the sense of what they had. But Aunt Alexandra was of the opinion, obliquely expressed, that the longer a family had been squatting on one patch of land, the finer it was. "Well, that makes the Yules fine folks then," said Jim. The tribe of which Burris Yule and his brethren consisted had living on the same plot of earth behind the Macomb dump, and had thrived on the county welfare money for 3 generations. So Aunt Alexandra's theory of how the longer you've lived in one place, the longer you have owned a piece of land, the more fine you are. You're a fine folk. You're like good people. And so Jim says, well, then that means the Yules are fine folks. But the Yules, they've lived on the same piece of land for many years. That piece of land is behind the dump, and Atticus has already told us that the Yules are considered white trash. That kind of puts Aunt Alexandra's theory, like, isn't quite perfect. She's not describing it the way that she really means. Think about what she might really mean by fine folks or good people. Aunt Alexandra's theory had something behind it, though. Macomb was an ancient town. It was 20 miles east of Finch's Landing, awkwardly inland for such an old town, because the older a town is, usually it's near a body of water so that you can do trade. Like, people would boat up to your town and trade with you and then boat back. It was like the easiest way to travel, like way back. So Macomb isn't next to any sort of body of water. However, it's a pretty old town and a pretty popular town as well. And Scout's going to go on to explain the history of that here pretty soon. And I'm just going to read through it. But Macomb would have been closer to the river had it not been for the nimble-wittedness of one Sinkfield, who in the dawn of history operated an inn where 2 pig trails met, and it was the only tavern in the territory. Sinkfield, no patriot, served and supplied ammunition to Indians and settlers alike, neither knowing or caring that he was a part of the Alabama Territory or the Creek Nation, as long as business was good. So there were these 2 sides that were fighting. Native Americans were fighting the settlers, and Sinkfield gave ammunition to both sides. He didn't care who he was selling arrows and bullets to, as long as he was making money. Business was excellent when Governor William Wyatt Bibb, wow, that's a name, when Governor William Wyatt Bibb, with a view on promoting the newly created county domestic tranquility, or peace, dispatched a team of surveyors to locate the exact center where they would establish the seat of government. The surveyors, Sinkfield's guests, told their host that he was in the territorial confines of Macomb County and showed him the probable spot where the county seat would be built. Had Sinkfield not made a bold stroke to preserve his holdings, Macomb would have sat in the middle of Winston's Swamp, a place totally devoid of interest. Instead, Macomb grew and sprawled out from its hub, Sinkfield's Tavern, because Sinkfield reduced his guests to myopic drunkenness one evening and induced them to bring forward their maps and charts, lop a little here, add a little bit there, adjust the center of the county to meet his requirements, and he sent them packing the next day with their charts and 5/4 of shinny in their saddlebags, 2 apiece and 1 for the governor. So these guys came to his tavern because it was the only place in like the middle of nowhere, and they were trying to decide where Macomb County would be and where the city would sit. And so what Sinkfield did is he got those people drunk, so drunk that he just like did the maps for them and put the city where he wanted it to be. And that's the reason why Macomb grew to the size that it did. Because if it was put on Winston Swamp, nobody would want to go there. But since Sinkfield moved the central part of the city to Sinkfield Tavern and the land that he was on, it allowed Macomb to grow and get bigger, according to Scout. Because its primary reason for existence was government, Macomb was spared the grubbiness that distinguished most Alabama towns its size. In the beginning, its buildings were solid, the courthouse proud, and its streets graciously wide. Macomb's proportion of professional people ran high. One went there to have his teeth pulled, his wagon fixed, his heart listened to, his money deposited, his soul saved, and his mules vetted. Meaning a lot of people went to Macomb to start their business, and I swear that gets longer every time. To start their business, and that meant that people would travel to Macomb. Kind of like how Mishawaka, we have the only like pretty nice mall in the area, so people from like Dunlap, Goshen, Elkhart all drive to Mishawaka to go to the mall because that's where it is. So same thing here, the only dentist, doctor, mechanic, veterinarian, and good church in the area was in Macomb County, in Macomb the city. And so people would drive to Macomb to get those things done because there wasn't one of those things where they're from. It's, again, similar to how people from all these other cities drive to Mishawaka because we have the only good mall or Best Buy in the nearest area. And that's how cities grow, is that people go there, they say good things about it, they go back home, then more people from where they're from go to the city, learn more about it, spend more money there, city grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. Correct. Where were we? Kind of up here, yeah. But the ultimate wisdom of Sinkfield's maneuver is open to question. He placed the young town too far away from the only kind of public transportation in those days, which was riverboat. And it took a man from the north end of the county 2 days to travel to Macomb for store-bought goods. It's because you had to walk. As a result, the town remained the same size for 100 years, an island in the patchwork sea of cotton fields and timberland. So it's still like a good city, a still thriving city, but it's far, far, far away from any other cities, and it couldn't get really any bigger because not a lot of people could travel in groups. Like, people would send one person to Macomb to go buy groceries for the week, but you wouldn't take like a family trip there because you can't take riverboat up to Macomb because it's too far inland. Although Macomb was ignored during the war between the states, Reconstruction rule and economic ruin forced the town to grow, and it grew inward. New people so rarely settled there. The same families married the same families until the members of the community looked faintly alike. Occasionally, someone would return from Montgomery or Mobile with an outsider, but the result caused only a ripple in the quiet stream of family resemblance. Things were more or less the same during my early years, so Scout's early years. There was indeed a caste system in Macomb, but to my mind it worked this way. The older citizens, the present generation of people who had lived side by side for years and years, were utterly predictable to one another. They took for granted attitudes, character shadings, even gestures as having been repeated in each generation and refined with time. Thus the dicta. No Crawford minds his own business. Every third Merriweather is morbid. The truth is not in the Delafields. All the Bufords walk like that. We're simply guides to daily living. These are those streaks that Alexandra was talking about earlier. Like, all the Crawfords have a gossiping streak. The Merriweathers have a morbid streak, a sad streak, things like that. Never take a check from a Delafield without a discreet call to the bank. Miss Maudie Atkinson's shoulder stoops because she was a Buford. If Miss Grace Merriweather sips gin out of Lydia E. Pinkman's bottles, it's nothing unusual. Her mother did the same. Meaning, like, people are like their parents and their grandparents before them and their grandparents before them. Like, you are like the people who raised you. You act like, walk like, even always look like the people that you come from. Aunt Alexandra fitted into the world of Maycomb like a hand into a glove, but never into the world of Jim and me. I so often wondered how she could be Atticus and Uncle Jack's sister that I revived half-remembered tales of changelings and mandrake roots that Jim had spun long ago. She thinks that she's a shapeshifter, like, because she's so different from Jack and Atticus. These were abstract speculations for the first month of her stay, as she had little to say to Jim and me, and we saw her only at meal times and at night before we went to bed. It was summer, and when we were outdoors. Of course, some afternoons I would run inside for a drink of water. I would find the living room overrun with Maycomb ladies, sipping, whispering, fanning, and I would be called, "Jean Louise, come speak to the ladies." And when I appeared in the doorway, my auntie would look as if she regretted her request. I was usually mud-splashed or covered with sand. "Speak to your cousin Lily," she said one afternoon when she had trapped me in the hall. "Who?" I said. "Your cousin, Lily Brooke," said Aunt Alexandra. "She our cousin? I didn't know that." Aunt Alexandra managed to smile in a way that conveyed a gentle apology to Cousin Lily and a firm disapproval for me. When Cousin Lily Brooke left, I knew I was in for it. It was a sad thing that my father had neglected to tell me about the Finch family or to install any pride into his children. She summoned Jim, who sat wearily on the sofa next to me. She left the room and returned with a purple-covered book on which Meditations of Joshua S. St. Clair was stamped in gold. "Your cousin wrote this," said Aunt Alexandra. "He was a beautiful character." Jim examined the small volume. "Is this the cousin Joshua who was locked up for so long?" Aunt Alexandra said, "How did you know that?" "Why, Atticus said he went round the bend at the university, said he tried to shoot the president, said cousin Joshua said he wasn't anything but a sewer inspector and tried to shoot him with an old flintlock pistol, only it just blew up in his hand. Atticus said it cost the family $500 to get him out of that one." Aunt Alexandra was standing as stiff as a stork. "That's all," she said. "We'll see about this." Before bedtime, I was in Jim's room trying to borrow a book when Atticus knocked and entered. He sat on the side of Jim's bed, looked at us soberly, and then he grinned. He said. He was beginning to preface some things he said with a throaty noise, so he went, and I thought he must at last be getting old, but he looked the same. "I don't know exactly how to say this," he began. "Well, just say it," said Jim. "Have we done something?" Our father was actually fidgeting. "No, I just want to explain to you that your Aunt Alexandra asked me, 'Son, you know you're a Finch, don't you?' 'That's what I've been told.'" Jim looked out the corners of his eyes. His voice rose uncontrollably. "Atticus, what's the matter?" Atticus crossed his knees and folded his arms. "I'm trying to tell you the facts of life." Jim's disgust deepened. "I know all that stuff," he said. Atticus suddenly grew serious. In his lawyer's voice, without a shade of inflection, he said, "Your aunt asked me to try and impress upon you and Jean Louise that you are not from run-of-the-mill people, that you are the product of several generations' gentle breeding." Atticus paused and watched me locate an elusive red bug on my legs. She's not paying attention. She's just looking at, like, a bug that was crawling on her leg. "Gentle breeding," he continued when I had found and scratched it, "and that you should try to live up to your name." Atticus persevered in spite of us, so he kept talking even though he knows they're not paying attention. "She asked me to tell you that you must try to behave like the little lady and gentleman that you are. She wants to talk to you about the family and what it's meant to Macomb County through the years. So you'll have some idea of who you are, and so you might be moved to behave accordingly. He concluded at a gallop. Stunned, Jim and I looked at each other, then at Atticus, whose collar seemed to worry him. We did not speak to him. Presently, I picked up a comb from Jim's dresser and ran its teeth along the edge. So she's picked up a comb and started doing this. "Stop that noise," Atticus said. His curtness stung me. The comb was midway in its journey, and I banged it down. For no reason, I felt myself begin to cry, but I couldn't stop. This was not my father. My father never thought these thoughts. My father never spoke like this. Aunt Alexandra put him up to this somehow. And through my tears, I saw Jim standing in a similar pool of isolation, his head cocked to one side. There was nowhere to go. But I turned to go and met Atticus's vest front. I buried my head in it and listened to the small internal noises that went on behind the light blue cloth. His watch ticking, the faint crackle of his starched shirt, the soft sound of his breathing. "Your stomach's growling," I said. "I know it," he said. "You better take some soda." "I will." "Atticus, is all this behaving and stuff gonna make things different? I mean, are you—" I felt his hand on the back of my head. "Don't you worry about anything," he said. "It's not time to worry." When I heard that, I knew he had come back to us. The blood in my legs began to flow again, and I raised my head. "You really want us to do all that? I can't remember everything Finches are supposed to do." "I don't want you to remember it. Forget it." He went to the door and out the room, shutting the door behind him. He nearly slammed it, but caught himself at the last minute and closed it softly. As Jim and I stared, the door opened again and Atticus peered around. His eyebrows were raised and his glasses had slipped. "Get more like Cousin Joshua every day, don't I? Don't you think I'll end up costing the family $500? I knew now what he was trying to do, but Atticus was only a man, and it takes a woman to do that kind of work. Atticus at the end was trying to be funny to kind of alleviate or ease the situation, trying to make them feel better and comfort them by being funny. But Scout says it takes a woman to do that kind of work. And when you think about it a little further, she means a specific woman, and she means her mom. But as we know, their mom's dead. So this is a time where Scout could probably have really used her mom. And that was chapter 13.